a traditional perspective.
Oh. Well, if he made us, we're perfect, wouldn't we be?
Therefore, what? If God made him, if God is perfect, and man make mistakes, and God made man, that's a problem. That's a problem.
But we don't make mistakes.
I said think about it from a traditional.
A tradition, oh, blah, blah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's an issue.
Sheldon, can you say something one more time, please? Like, good morning? I think it's you this time, actually. We can't hear you,
Okay.
so.
Miss Phoebe, can you see?
We
Huh?
still can't
Can
hear
you
you.
see? What, TV?
Oh, you call it, you Skype. You
You
join
ain't
the
sleep.
Skype to see if you can hear you.
Huh? You not sleeping?
I'm talking about from your phone.
No,
Not yet.
He can hear me.
Oh, why come we can't hear?
hopefully not today.
Okay,
I don't know why we can't hear him.
okay, well, you work on it while we talk, how about that?
That works.
Okay. I wanted to, well, Nick is not here, obviously, so, I wanted to see if, last week, there were a lot of things we talked about. And, I was trying to remember, where we ended up, but I didn't. So I want to know if there are questions, or comments before I ask a question and get started.
I want to ask a question about the verse, please.
The who?
The verse,
Which verse?
verse 70 that Nick read last week.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus said that which you have will save you if you bring it forth from yourselves. That which you do not have within you will kill you if you do not have it within you. The kill is something we put in there, or that's the intent behind.
That's the intent.
Okay, kill being will
Um,
destroy you.
Destroy. Well, it will destroy you, your image of you.
Okay, so if, for example, this is what comes to my mind. If you don't have it in you to be, let's say, mean, right? When you're trying to be mean, in other words, you're really injuring yourself.
Okay, this is what it's saying.
Okay.
What's deep within inside you is light.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing that frees you. That's what gives you salvation. That's what saves you, right? If you choose to be saved by that which is external,
Okay.
you got it?
Yes.
Because when Jesus said that if your light is darker than your whole body is dark, that's because we look for external salvation.
Whatever. If we're looking outside for the source of life.
Yes. And see, the other part of that is we have this idea of being separate, being an island unto ourselves, separate from the Creator. That's why when it talks about, when it says that, and Jesus looked up into the heavens and cried, Eli Ephatah, when he opened the blind man's eyes. It's somewhere in Matthew, I believe. When he opened the blind man's eyes, I'm sorry, it wasn't his eyes, his ears. He was deaf, and he put his fingers in his ears. And when it says he looked into up to heaven, it does not really say that. It says he looked to the light, or he perceived the light. He saw the light, and then he said what he said. The word that he said comes from it's the same word that's used for Ptah, the Greek god, which means that the Egyptian god rather. And the Egyptians believed that Ptah opened his mouth and everything came out of it. And that word also means in Arabic means to open. So he was opening his hearing to another world. And the hearing that he was opening was not only the natural hearing, but it's also, he was speaking of the spiritual hearing. That's how healing takes place, whether it's emotional or physical, from one person to another, by virtue of you're seeing the opening, you're seeing the way or having confidence in it. When the centurion came to Jesus and he did not go to the house, what we kind of miss is that he said that he was a ruler over men, and when he said come, they come, he said go, they go, etc. What we miss is that when the centurion got home, the child was healed, right? The servant was healed, right? The servant was not healed until the centurion got there.
Oh.
What actually healed the servant was his presence, because he accepted it. He trusted the light. Can you see what I'm saying?
So the servant was still not healed until that.
Till he stepped across the threshold. Yeah. Can you see that? If we can, are you okay?
You have some problems?
If we can see that and trust that, then what we come to understand is this. When he says, if you have the faith that I have in the Father, what he's actually talking about is living confidence.
Living confidence.
Yeah, the confidence of life. If you believe that you are life, then you can bring renewal, you can bring healing, you can change the pathway of darkness, or you can bring light to that darkness. This is the thing. When you are living light, you are always in search of darkness to step into.
But if you're living light, does not darkness find you?
The darkness draws you, but we miss it most of the time. When the darkness draws us, we see it as a problem and we complain, rather than deal with it, accept it, embrace it, or whatever it takes to get beyond that. But you're right; it's no different than the darkness drawing the light in Genesis. You see, and what we do, we attribute the healing to the. Thank you. We attribute the healing to the Holy Spirit, right? We attribute the guidance because the Holy Spirit is the teacher, right? But what we miss also is what we are actually saying is holy breath. And holy breath has nothing to do with religion, but it has everything to do with breath that's set aside or breath that's consecrated for a specific purpose. And the specific purpose of breath of this consecrated breath is to show us or allow us to see who we are, or to guide us along this journey. Can you see that? Does that make sense? So what happens in the English language is that we are limited because we got air, breath, wind, spirit, when in actuality in the Hebrew or the Aramaic, or in Eastern languages, in the Semitic language I should say, whether it be Babylonian, Ugaritic, Aramaic, Hebrew, Arab, is still the same word is used for air. Why? Because there is no distinction in the mind of the Eastern person. There is no distinction between the air that flows around the earth and the breath that you breathe. There's no distinction between that. Now, when you really think about it, when we talk about breathing, right? Who is the you that breathes? Is it not the energy?
I was gonna ask if that was a trick question.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's yeah.
Is that not the energy that breathes? What is breathing? What does it mean to breathe?
Exchange gases.
The neck,
That didn't come out right.
to the neck, to take in breath that sustains life by energizing the organs.
Okay.
It was a
What
trick
did she only
question.
know?
I just do it. Ain't no telling.
Okay. All right. When we really think about breathing, right? It's not just, we don't breathe to bring life to us. We breathe in order to change the breath into life for everything around us. Carbon dioxide, the Krebs cycle. Can you see that? We are life. It's no different than when he breathed the breath of life into his nostrils. Is that not what we do? The breath of life goes into the plants. Is that not what we do?
Yeah.
When we exhale?
Yeah, when we exhale.
Yeah. So breathing is both inhaling and exhaling. You see? It takes both. So life, so it is a reminder to us that life comes from deep within. Because when we inhale, the breath goes within, right? The air. When we exhale, what does it creates? It brings, it gives life rather to the plants, etc., right? So where is that coming from? It's coming from every cell in our body, isn't it? That's where it comes from. It comes from every cell in our body. So that reminds us that though these bodies are really a corpse, it is the breath that is the life of the bodies. For the life is in the blood. That's the spirit. That's the air. That's what we call oxygenated blood. So the air. So that's the life. Listen at it this way. We actually breathe. What is it? 21% oxygen. We breathe 21% oxygen. But if you pass out, they give you oxygen. They don't give you the rest of the stuff. So there has to be a purpose. You know, the rest of the gases, the trace gases that makes up the rest of the, 79%. So why does that happen? Because it is the oxygen that we use to give life to the plants. So the oxygen is transformed in our cells to carbon dioxide. And the purpose of it is life. So when we buy into it, when we embrace, when we truly believe that we are life givers, or we are the source of life, when we buy into that, then it is much easier to bring deliverance. And when I speak of deliverance, I speak of deliverance in terms of the way it was put forth last week, being aware of the light that you are. When we bring deliverance by virtue of helping others to see the light that they are. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And Evelyn said earlier, it helps us to connect, but it really doesn't, because we've never been disconnected. the thing that helps us realize that we have never been disconnected is the realization as to who we are and the way we were created. See, the way we were brought into being is not the second chapter. I mean, the first chapter of Genesis. The way we were brought into being is the second chapter of Genesis. Because in the first chapter of Genesis, I think it's 1:27, 1:26, 27, when it talks about and he created them a male and female. It says that God created it. So let me go down. I want to read exactly what it says. I want to read exactly what it says because I want to show you something that I haven't. I just saw. Okay. God created, it's amazing, and we're straight to the chapter, the verse. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. Okay, now, this is what happened in this particular verse. The energy of the feminine and masculine energy was brought into being at this point. In that second chapter, when it talks about the creation of man, it was forming the energy.
Say that again, please.
Okay, in the 27th verse, the energy was brought forth. The male and feminine energy, right, was brought forth. Now, when it talks about image, it talks about the space that was created for male and female energy to be brought forth, just like the male and female energy that was in the entity that brought it forth. Because it says image, right? Now, from this point, prior to that, there was nothingness. That doesn't mean there was no thing. There was nothing formed. Now, from this energy that was brought forth, the Adam was formed. Adam was formed. Can you see that? So if Adam was formed from the energy that was brought forth in the first chapter, and from this Adam came this thing that we call the human being, then if you follow the course of it, you have to see if you're logical or illogical. For that matter, the truth of the matter is, if you follow the course of it, you will see that there is not one time in between or since then that the entity that was created was disconnected from life or was not life itself. It has always been life. It is almost like the further we get away from, in terms of generations, from the things that our grandparents or parents did to, for example, like rabbit tobacco was used for asthma, and rabbit tobacco tea was used for a lot of things, right? Pine needle tea. Janice's generation has not heard of that. You see? So the further we get away from that, the less they are aware of that. Now, if you can take that and relate it to what we just talked about the energy, right? The further we get away from that, the less we are aware of it. You see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Now, when I talk about the further we get away from it, I'm not talking about in terms of distance. I'm talking about in terms of awareness.
Right.
Because, again, don't forget, there is no tomorrow, there's only now. So when we began the journey of awareness, so that we can actually see the reality of that energy, it is at that point that we began to function in the way that we were created to function, and that is to bring order to disorder, light to darkness, etc. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So in actuality, there has never been a disconnection any more than there has been a disconnection between me and my grandparents, or you and yours.
Right.
There's not a disconnection there. It's just a journey that has been embarked upon that in a sense, decreases the awareness of who we are. And if you follow the entire Genesis story, what you know all the way through, that's what you find. I was talking to Ron this morning about some of the stuff, and when he made some comments, what I saw was, if you follow the Genesis story, what you see is the energy of male and female, right? Then you see it formed into the Adam. And then you see the thoughts come into being in terms of the animals, etc. Then you see, you talk about him being placed in the garden. You see the place of nurturing for these thoughts. And then you begin to see the tree of life, etc. And from that, you begin to see the rivers flowing away. And every culture on the face of the earth, you can relate to the meaning of the word for those rivers. Every culture, you can relate to that. So you begin to see a coalescing of thought as you go further and further away from where the energy was formed. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And if you can see the coalescing of thought, then you also begin to see that we meaning the entities that assumed that they were separate from the whole, we began to gravitate more towards those thoughts that develop our culture, and then we gravitate toward an awareness of who we are, and that is one of the reasons that every culture has a belief that this being that's called human originated from a central source, or a source greater than the human is, and everything that is came from that source. Cultures believe that, but the more cultures began to develop in terms of what we call modern, the less awareness they have of of the beliefs that their foreparents had. Does that make sense? You follow me?
Yeah, I think you could probably be more dramatic than that and say, probably sort of thinking it circles outside of circles, or like a drop of water in a pond. It's going out like that. That you got to a certain point where, let's say, we could differentiate between traditional cultures and the quote modern. So you probably had at a certain point a sort of shift, the algorithm, whatever. There was a big jump change. You know what I mean? Because of maybe an innovation or something, whether it was agriculture, whether it was people living together, something that just didn't make it the same circle just going out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
so
do.
it's like it was another level, and then that created the possibility for different, what do you want to say, distortions in that balance of, in that mix. And so, wow.
Well, and if you look at that
So
circle,
it's like an inverted, what do you call it in the water, that whirlpool?
yeah,
It's like a whirlpool in reverse, you know?
yeah,
But it's not coming together, it's going
it's
out.
going out.
I don't know if you could say that's a tornado, I don't know, anyway.
It moves as one.
Depends on which
But
way
I
it
can
goes.
see that, and I also can see that as what we call different time periods.
Yeah,
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 as
exactly,
a circle.
epochs or, yeah. But I'm
And-
saying, and then we also say, but there were leaps of
Right,
difference
Which means-
created by that. So we say agriculture and then boom,
Right.
everything changed,
so that was it.
things like that.
And those leaps are really influxes of light, huge influxes of light. But instead of using it for the sense of awareness of who we are, it was used to further make it easier to be a human. Because that's what everything that was invented, for lack of a better term, or brought into being by us, was to make it easier. Was it not? To make it easier to be human. But what we found out was, when it became easier to be human, it became more difficult to acquire those things that make it easier. And that began to break us up into subdivisions of the have and the have-nots, the social have and the social have-not, the cultural, the so-called third world, that kind of thing, versus the first world. So those kinds of things we began to develop that actually took us further and further away.
Yeah, my sense is it's related to this whole notion of if you're 1 degree off center,
You missed the whole thing.
by the time you get out there far enough, there's a huge,
Yeah. So what happened, when we look at that energy, it's no different than what we do even to this day. We use it, or we manipulate it, I should say, we manipulate it to fit our whims, as opposed to allowing it to be what it is. One of the things that fascinates me, or disturbs me, I should say, not fascinates. One of the things that disturbs me is that the human can accept anything that is, the human can accept spiritual stagnation, but the human always challenges intellectual stagnation. The human is always trying to develop intellectually and encourage intellectual development, but can accept spiritual stagnation. When you were 10 years old, the same message that you hear in the church now was being spoken then. Maybe not in the same words, maybe not as eloquent, but the same thing was being spoken. So, my question would be, so what kept us in that cycle when we saw that there was, from the age of 10 up to now, there has been no more understanding of what was being delivered than it was from the beginning. So if you were in an intellectual, an academic environment, and when you were 10 years old, there was no more understanding of mathematics than there were when you were 10, then that would be a problem, wouldn't it? But we accept the spiritual stagnation.
Mm.
You see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And why is it that we accept it? I believe it's because we enjoy being human. And I want to talk about something else in a moment. Go ahead, Richard.
No, I'm saying it's got to be, because I mean, there's this old saying that one of the bodhisattvas understood the principles of what made a helicopter, even conceived before Da Vinci of that, and then tore it up, threw it away, because he said this will just further distract human beings. So we can accept stagnation in one or the other, but not both. So if we're that enamored and seduced by the intellectual, what it shows is maybe our passion for growth, for development. But the difficulty is developing on both with a balance, or not neglecting the one for the other. So you could argue that if we had intellectual stagnation, maybe that would have pushed us back to the other way. But because that thing is so sexy and we're so enamored by it, and look at this whole thing we've been through this week. People running around feeling how fantastic now, all this FBI, what do you call it, like the TV show, the ability to analyze and piece together data. CSI kind of stuff now. Now we're even further enamored with all that technology, and nobody's asking the question, which I was almost crying last night. I just kept thinking, this was a 19-year-old boy. This kid had a whole life ahead of him.
Yeah.
And we're going to suck everything out of him now, and then we're going to lock him up, and I hope we don't kill him. But he's going to get to live a long time, and I hope he can find some way to make something of it. But nobody's saying what turned that 19-year-old.
Yeah.
Just like Connecticut, what allowed that to happen?
Right.
And then I went farther. What allowed that guy to push the button on the helicopter in Iraq that made him enjoy murdering those people in the square?
Right.
I mean, it's all connected to me.
Oh,
But anyway.
no joke. I mean, it
And
is
they're
connected.
all about the same age.
It is connected. There's no doubt about the connection of it. We say it's a wake-up call. a wake-up call. Hear that? We've been asleep. It's a wake-up call. But rather than what we call the awakening is a continuation of the norm, as opposed to waking up and desiring to understand what made him do that. How did this come about?
Yeah.
To answer those kinds of questions, that's what a wake-up call is supposed to be about, as opposed to a continuation of the norm.
We'll have to see what happens. But in the immediate reaction, we're just in love with the technology that solves the thing so fast.
But I have to think that there are, we're talking in generalities right now, but it was a wake-up call for somebody.
Yeah.
No, I think
For
it's there.
somebody. So,
But you probably won't see too much of that in the mainstream media. Maybe you will. Maybe this will die down a bit and people will start asking why this guy. how did
usually
this
you
guy
don't
turn?
see that in the mainstream.
You won't see it.
I know.
Spiritual what?
But you know what's going to happen too. Until he speaks, we're gonna be.
We're the he.
Huh?
We're the he. We're speaking now.
Okay, well that part of us then is going to say it was the older brother until we learn otherwise.
No, what this is.
So is that other part of ourselves that
The
corrupted
wake-up
this
call
innocent
is
part of
ours.
ourselves?
It's not the media's.
No, I know that.
It is ours. We have to deal with this from the perspective that we are dealing with it. That he who did this is us. And that's a flaw in us. So the whole thing with Sandy Hook took on a life of its own because they were children. There was no outcry like that after Columbine because they were children. So we
and they were children created in our image, not the image of the Creator.
right
And so it's like cutting off.
what we call innocence.
Yeah, but it was digging up our roots. The children are our thoughts, and so it was an assassination of our thoughts. And if we just leave it at that, we will continue on just like we are, relying on they try to get guns, all this other stuff that's part of the illusion.
Distraction.
Yeah.
Janice.
Well, just the people who commit the acts are our thoughts as well.
No,
And I feel like there's something to be understood about their level of maturity and the violent thoughts that we have, but I don't understand how to pull it all together. I feel like they get just old enough to wreak havoc.
just maybe. What is it?
Well, I think they're in that place where we were all once, where you're old enough to know better,
Yeah.
but you're old enough to have access to certain things, but you don't have enough self-awareness to control it all.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go off and, in any direction.
That's true.
But it's necessary. If those events had not taken place, we would not be having this discussion. We would not be seeking answers. We would not be desirous of more light or more awareness. We wouldn't be at this point had these things not taken place.
But I think that's why you can have a 19-year-old, pull the trigger on a gunship, because they're at this place
Well, that's exactly
where
right.
they can be influenced to go one way or another, because they're searching for something, searching for themselves, and if you convince them that they are this, then that's the way they're going to go.
And if you love your older brother, that more mature aspect of yourself, you have faith in. And if it says it's okay, you rationalize it's okay. Let's do it.
See, now this is what I believe, that those who are on the journey of truth or seekers of truth must recognize those kinds of events not only as a wake-up call, but also as a distraction. And what I mean by that is this. If we get caught up in what took place, we lose sight of where we're going. I'm not saying that you don't have empathy, but what I am saying is that everything that transpires in the earth consciousness, no matter how horrific we see it, it still is a distraction. It cannot be the focus. The focus must be the light. The focus must be the awareness. And the more we seek the awareness, the more we begin to see one or two things. An increase in darkness that desires to be brought to a place of awareness. And at some point you begin to see what I call a turn in that, which is not actually a turn, but more of a sense of awareness, of acceptance of who we are. But without these events, that doesn't happen. There has to be something to propel you to a place where you desire what we call change, and the thing that we call change is actually a desire for awareness. Does that make sense? So I think that's where this started.
Well, I was just thinking back to what you were saying about intellectual versus spiritual. Intellectual growth versus spiritual stagnation. But I think it all, but I think we can have leaps and bounds in intellectual growth because mostly it leads to some sort of physical manifestation of something. You know, iPhones, iPads, blah, 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 blah. Which is, and if we're into the materialistic side of it, you know, it looks like, wow.
Growth.
Yeah, it looks like growth. But on the other side, if you don't have any sort of physical manifestation, and this side has all that physical manifestation, it's hard to look that way.
But see, Jesus says what? Blessed are those who believe who have not seen.
Right. But the other side too is, like when I was 16 or 17 years old and I was challenging these male ministers about what the Bible was saying, you know, I got shot down big time. So, I mean, that can be pretty daunting too. Because when you're in that age group, you're really, really, really looking for yourself. So, it can, based on who's influencing you, you can go one way or the other.
And
you can not go the way that you should go.
Now, if you step back from that for a second and see that the desire to influence, the desire to influence that we have comes from not shaping the light, allowing the light to shape itself. Now, having said that, I believe that the challenges that we faced back from questioning things when we were younger was actually preparing us for such a time as this. Because we're open to things. It opened us up. Whether you challenge the Bible, challenge whatever, it opened you up for change. Then, that's why I say we have to travel this journey as though there is no one else doing it except us on the face of this earth. Because we cannot afford to be lax in any area or at any point. And if we travel this journey as if no one else is doing it except us on the face of this earth, then that in itself makes us more vigilant. And by virtue of that, we have the ability, the potential, or we are, however you want to term it, I don't know the term for it yet, but we have the potential to put so much energy out there or bring it to bear until it does not become daunting for someone to raise those questions. As a matter of fact, this is what I do believe is transpiring even as we speak, and we're going to see a huge change between now and the end of the year. This is what I believe. Those who ask questions will not stay. They'll walk away. And they'll find their answers someplace else. And the someplace else where they'll find their answers depends on us, what we put out there, what we talk about, what do we believe, whether we become, what our desire rather, to move beyond spiritual stagnation. But that does not mean that you exchange spiritual stagnation for intellectual stagnation. That does not mean that at all, because the scripture clearly says that the spiritual man knows all things. So this intellectual thing we have substituted. That's our spiritual stuff. That we have substituted for what the spiritual, because with the intellect we can develop things that we can manifest. But with the spiritual, when you manifest it, there are very few who believe it. You see? Even the people for whom it happens. I remember the lady at Haskell who could not read the thing bound in the back of the sanctuary without her glasses. And my statement to her was, at the end, you will be okay. And when I finished delivering the message, I called her up and asked her to read the banner without her glasses, and she could do it. You see what I'm talking about? She to my knowledge, she never wore them again. Now, there were those who said she could see all the time. There were those who said, so who believes that? That doesn't happen now. You see what I'm talking about? Now, at that moment, they held on to it. But the further they got away from the actual manifestation of it, the less they believed it. That's what I mean when I talk about having living confidence in the Word. No matter what transpires through physical manifestation or through spiritual awareness, you still hold on to your living confidence in this Word. Why? Because when you look at a word in the Scriptures, you look at the Hebrew or the Aramaic root of that word, and that's what helps you to see the different spiritual manifestations of it in terms of what it means. And if we trace it back to the root, then our belief has to be that these letters that form the root are alive themselves. They are energy. And out of this energy grows a word. And out of that word grows a sentence. Are you following what I'm trying to say? So if that is life at the root, then the word becomes life, the sentence is life, and the paragraph is life, everything is life. So our speaking has to be, we have to be more cognizant of the way we speak when we begin to realize that speech itself is a determiner of light or darkness, life or death. We have to do that. And we have to be aware constantly of the necessity in our ability to move beyond those things that we were ingrained with as children that we see now are different in the Scriptures. Can you see that? We have to do that. Why? Because to do anything else is to say that what we see spiritually is not real, but what we saw religiously is. we have a tendency to move towards those things that we think are real. We have a tendency to move in that direction. And the direction that we move in tells us whether or not we are indeed in pursuit of truth or whether it's just a byproduct of our movement. And by movement, I'm talking about in terms of our thoughts and actions as a result of our thoughts. I believe that we have to, when he says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and righteousness, all these things will be added, I believe that that's the key. Not that you don't go to work, but that's not your priority. Not that you don't pay your bills, but that's not your priority. Your priority is to seek the kingdom within. To be aware of the kingdom, which means that you're aware of you. To be aware of the balance of light that you are and the balance that you are supposed to represent. When you sit with two siblings, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, just people, and you do counseling, what you're doing is bring balance to a relationship. That's the attempt, isn't it? To bring balance to the relationship.
Yeah.
So our lives should be representative of that balance that's within.
So I just got a question. The heaviness that I feel, and I am not,
Mm-hmm.
is it because of the activities that we see in the earth right now, or is it something that...
No matter what it is, it's an activity in the earth. Regardless of what you label it as causing the heaviness,
Yeah.
it's an activity in the earth. So it doesn't matter whether it's the heaviness comes as a result of this 19-year-old kid that nobody cares is paying any attention to right now.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter whether it comes that or whether it comes as because something happened across town that you're not even aware of.
Mm. Yeah.
The point of the heaviness is to bring light.
And by us discussing it, it just...
It helps.
Take care. Okay.
But I think, I understand what you're saying, because last night I was saying, we all got, what is it,
PTSD.
Everybody's walking around with it.
Yeah.
I don't care, maybe that sounds too dramatic. You don't have to be in a conflict to feel the energy and the effect of that. You don't have to be in Boston to have felt all that. It's there. So we're all Boston, so to speak, you know? So there's even more that maybe is happening we're not aware of, whatever. So yeah, the question is, how do you recognize that and then deal with it? And what I'm thinking of is, what you're trained when you give massage is if somebody comes to you and they really have pains, and some of them could well be emotional in core and source, you can't take that out of them and absorb that in yourself. You know, it's not like the Green Mile where you can suck all the flies in there. Because by the end of the day, you're going to be the one who's in pain, etc. You have to find some way to help relieve that, but then care for yourself as well, otherwise. So I think what you're also saying is, how do you go through this, see its effect and learn from it, but know that ultimately, what do I want to say? It's okay, it's part of the journey,
Yeah.
it's part of the learning. And if it's more horrific, well, maybe we just needed a bigger collision to catch our attention. You know what I mean? But don't forget that this past week, more than any number of these Americans, and there's stories that are really, you know, one of the women who lost their legs was just recently an immigrant from Haiti. She went through an earthquake in her home country, came to the United States, she got no leg. You know, there's all this, and then they had a nice little analogy last night. The young Chinese girl, she came thinking this was full of opportunity. Apparently the older brother, who had it all set up for him, thought there was no opportunity. So, you know,
Yeah.
those are parts of if you want to say those are things in yourself that are still confused and don't know how to balance it. What am I trying to say? Too long-winded. There's a fatigue with that. There's a
No, it makes sense.
heaviness with that. So
Yeah.
I feel it.
If you're not careful, you get to the place where you say, "The hell with it."
Well, or
And you can't do that.
you don't want to get to the point where you can't get out of bed,
Yeah. You see what I'm talking about?
at least for more than a day.
Mom Jane. Mom Jane,
Mhm.
come on.
Well, you early human, so to speak.
I remember the incident with the Quaker children
Yeah.
and the response.
Amish
The
Yeah,
first
Amish.
response, the Amish, I'm sorry.
children,
The first response was, and they were children as well, they were
Mhm.
thoughts as well. But they forgave. That was the thing they did. And so it's almost like this bomb went, BALM, not
Yeah.
BOMB.
Yeah.
This healing bomb went over the country. And it's like a seed that's under the ground, and it gets that nourishment. You can't see it then, but it's being nourished and fed then. Unlike what happened here, or with the children of Sandy Hook, all that stuff is out there, and there were a few parents that said I forgave, but that's not what you heard. And so it's like stuff that comes up out of the ground real quick. It's burned by the sun with all of our, oh, we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that. How dare, and it's burned and nothing happens, nothing manifests out of that destructive kind of thing. But the children of the Amish who died and their parents immediately forgave, we don't see the effect of that, but we felt it. And other people felt it too. And so I think the best thing that we can do is to continue by saying, it happened. And forgive the guy who did it. For whatever reason he did it. Because that's not, that's just one thing. That's not the bigger picture.
This is what you just described. Wherefore I say unto you, all manner of sin and blasphemy shall be forgiven unto men, but the blasphemy against the Holy Ghost shall not be forgiven unto men. That's what you just described. Because of what that really means. It says all manner of blasphemy other than that blasphemy, right? Which means that there are ways to blaspheme other than blaspheming the Holy Spirit. The key to it is understanding what it means to blaspheme. Blaspheme means to disconnect or to cut yourself off from the source of something. Sin talks about entanglements. The thing, if you're entangled in something that causes you to believe that you have been cut off from the source of life, then that will not be forgiven. What that means is, forgiven is talking about returning you to the state of your original being. That will not return you to beginning. That will not carry you back to beginning. You see, it will not lead you on the journey to beginning. The ones who did not forgive, the ones who did not restore the one who perpetrated this to the dignity of their being, will not be led to a place of restoration themselves. Can you see the picture here? Because the Amish, not only did they do that, they also burned the building, or burned the school, so it would not be a reminder. So it would not be a symbol. You see, so that's full restoration offered to the perpetrator, wherein the streets were lined with people as though it was a parade when they captured this 19-year-old.
Yeah.
And they were cheering that he was captured and not giving any thought to the idea of the reason he did what he did is because of what he was entangled with. And the way to disentangle is by virtue of forgiveness. That's how you do that. But when you look at it from both perspectives, it says to me anyway that we do indeed have our work cut out for us. And the work that we have cut out for us is to make sure that the seed of forgiveness that was sown by the Amish comes up out of the ground, but is nourished to the extent that it is not burned by the sun. That it grows to maturation. It grows to a point where forgiveness becomes the prevailing thought. That's a lot of work.
But, sorry, Sheldon's reading.
Okay, Sheldon.
Yes, I feel like those who set out to do things like that, they're not the only ones who share that feeling. I believe that there are others, no matter what size they may be, in proportion to the rest of the population, but they feel ostracized and not accepted, etc. And I think when the attitudes of all of us collectively change as far as accepting them, and they feel as though they are one, then all of these things will change. I think there's some type of cutoff, of course, on both sides, and not accepting the other, or not seeing the other as thyself. That's what I pretty much feel about the situation. So I think, unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of how did they do this? How could someone do this? What would drive a person to do these type of things? But I think that's what is missing. That is what is going to take. I believe this is an opportunity for that to take place in these types of incidents.
So,
but I think what's interesting about that is, I think, fairly or not, we don't, although I've seen little pieces for the moment, we don't expect that dialogue from the mainstream. That's dialogue that's in small groups within ourselves as well, because that's where the real intimate discussion is. That's an unfortunate thing, I guess, because in some respects you'd almost like the mainstream to lead a bit. Maybe they will, because people have been saying things are different this time, a little bit, right? But it made me think like the NRA's function, and I'm not just going to focus on that, but the whole thing like with Connecticut was, it's a madman. It's not me. It's a madman. It's not the madness and confusion in me. It's them versus me. It's what Sheldon just said. It's that whole thing that allows you to separate. So you put it in a box. And the thing about the Amish is, to me, the beauty of that is whether the rest of the world allows that energy to permeate, the Amish will keep it alive, at least. So it's there, potentially available for everybody, right?
But like Pastor said a few moments ago, I think also that we still need to act as if we are the only ones. And you can't quantify it, but we have an effect on not only those around us, but those everywhere in all of our, not even just actions, but thoughts as well. So the whole idea that we share thoughts with one another, as long as we continue to not look bad upon these people, to accept this person as just, okay, it was only an entanglement that they were actually dealing through. It has no reflection on the person that they are. All of us have gone through entanglements, and we continue to go through entanglements. So that's just what it was, an entanglement. But as we accept them for who they are, as we just look at it as not being something major, they're just some horrible, horrendous person, others will experience the same thing. They're not going to know where it came from. They're not going to know why they feel the way that they feel, but we allow them to also forgive them just by our actions and thoughts of feeling that in our hearts towards them.
I think as this journey requires that. It's not that the biological lineage of those who were injured or killed has to forgive. Because it works, if they are us and we are them, then when we do the forgiving, it's done by all of us. You see where I'm coming from? It overrides that, because light always overrides darkness. So we have to be in a true state of forgiveness, regardless of what has transpired. And that in itself brings about a maturation of the seed of forgiveness. If we believe that there is another segment and it doesn't forgive, or we don't know whether it did or not, then we got a problem. But if we act as if we're the only entity in the earth that does what we do, then we are able to disentangle the unforgiveness and bring restoration to mankind. I believe also that this further shows us the necessity in our seeking to understand this thing called death. Because if you look at it from a human perspective, just totally human perspective, then the human who could bring about this kind of carnage is dead eternally. So death cannot mean disengage from this corpse, the body. It means for more than that. So by virtue of our forgiveness, what we're actually doing is bringing life. We are renewing life. Does that make sense? Diane?
That's my question before I go. Left the bill thought and come back again. When you were reading from the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Okay, you were reading it and I had it and then the thought left because.
You want me to read it again?
My question is, you gave the difference, what it meant to blasphemy means.
Yeah.
Blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. How do we blaspheme?
By virtue of believing that we have been cut off.
That's what I thought the answer was,
Yeah.
but I want to make sure.
Now,
But the other thing too is that, not to minimize, what we're not doing is minimizing the carnage and what people are feeling as a result of this, because they are beings living as humans. But it's also to acknowledge that the persons who did this have that divine breath, that seed of divine breath also. And so we can't see ourselves as totally separate from them as well.
See, I understand all of that because that's what I was sensing when all of this went down. I knew the hatred was going to come towards them. But my whole thing is, we're all still connected, even within them. And we're in a society now where it's rising up, where it's coming forth more to the top. That those that feel that they're cut off and their reaction or the retaliation is either in taking up their own life or taking up other people's lives as a way of, I guess with me the other day, it was like the feeling of what were they experiencing, what were they going to, what were they feeling, to drive them to that point. It wasn't so much as what were the family members feeling that lost a loved one or had a leg covered. We have troops who are severed, have body parts in war, but what were those two guys experiencing? Their hurt, their feel, their disgust, whatever it was that they were feeling, to put this to this point, because we often focus on who we call a victim.
and we do. We focus on both.
Yeah.
I mean, there's empathy for the victims as well as the perpetrator. Now, see, you cannot believe that you're part of the whole in terms of life itself and not have empathy for both. So when we talk about blasphemy, the feeling of being cut off from the Holy Spirit or the Holy Breath or Holy Wisdom, Hakma, when that experience itself is perpetuated by religion. It doesn't matter what non-seekers believe. It doesn't matter. Keep in mind, it wasn't the non-seekers who challenged Jesus. It was the ones who purported to be seeking. Are you with me? Now, the ones who say that they are seeking truth and that they have it are the same ones who say that it is impossible for God to live within him because of what he did. When you see, that's taught that God does not hear a sinner's prayer, with sin being different than what it actually means. That is actually taught. Now, one of the people who teaches that challenged me on that very point. And his youth director ended up in jail for selling drugs. So my question that I sent back to him, because I couldn't get with him, was he saved? Did God live in him? And if he didn't, why did you have over your youth? You see? So that, even though it doesn't make sense, it still has an effect. So what is being taught is darkness. And is being taught as though it's light. Therefore, the whole body is what? Dark. Can you see that? So if we have to, with huge amount of empathy for everything that goes on, we have to be propelled towards a greater desire for light. As a matter of fact, if you don't have empathy for everyone involved, you are not seeking light. You're fooling yourself. I had a crying baby moment this week. I was sitting waiting for them to call me in for a discussion, for an interview rather, and not an interview, a discussion of some things I was dealing with. And this kid was sitting there, and this kid is about 14 years old, they're 13, 14 years old, and he making all these noises, and his parents are sitting there and not saying anything. And he constantly, all kinds of crazy stuff. And he said, "One chair for me." And my first reaction, then one of the parents said, "That man go slap you if you don't stop making that noise." And I'm thinking, I sure want to.
I think they do that.
Then it dawned on me, I could hear Nick talking about your crying baby moment. And all of a sudden, it began to subside.
Or slap the mother.
And,
Yeah.
and once it subsided, then he stopped. Not only did he stop, but they were called. So he was gone completely. You see, we have to recognize what's happening, what's going on, whether it be a crying baby moment for you, or whether it be a bomb going off in Boston, or whether it be a kid dragged out of a boat. The empathy goes everywhere. But guess what? We should have the same amount of empathy, if not more, for those who are teaching that God does not hear a sinner's prayer. We have to be empathetic towards them as well.
Because if that was the case, it'd have never heard any of us. Because
Yeah, you're right. Maybe
there would be no forgiveness.
he would hear nobody else. But you're right. He would never hear any. Did she leave?
Yeah, I'm watching.
Oh, okay. I get what you're saying.
Talking about dropping the baby out of the church. Yeah.
But she wouldn't go to jail because she left that church.
I didn't even notice that.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, it's.
Oh, Sheldon. Okay. Go ahead, Richard. It's Sheldon.
Well, I mean, one of the folk sayings, and I think there's so much truth, that's how they persist. But we poo-poo them sometimes because they're so unchurchy or simplistic. But I have felt I cannot get out of my head for most of my life the expression, there but for fortune, go you or I. When things happen, it just comes up in me. You know?
But
I can't imagine that whatever this is so foreign that it, you know what I mean? It's almost that expression that nothing's ever been done that whatever a human can conceive of doing will or has been done.
Now I want you to hear something. And then I got you, Sheldon. But for fortune, there goes I. It's a culture thing. Ours was, but for the grace of God, there goes I. But they mean basically the same thing.
Yeah.
You see what I'm talking about? So it doesn't matter. Culture doesn't matter. Language doesn't matter. What matters is desire. What is your purpose? What's your intent? That's what matters. And that's the thing that we have to get to. With a pure desire. Okay? Let me get Sheldon. Unless you want to...
No, I was just going to say, the trick is, it's easier for me to explain fortune than you to explain the grace of God.
I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, that's the challenge.
Yeah.
Right? But if it's essentially subconsciously the same, it's connected. To have it in you gives you that connection. But now you gotta say, what do you mean by the grace of God? Because now we're born again or not born again, and you realize, no, that's level 2. We're talking about level 10 here.
Not for the culture he's talking about, though. That's,
No,
that's
but I'm
explicit
saying-
in that culture.
I can explain to you how I could be like him had the circumstances in my life been like his, right? But now when you talk about the grace of God, now incorrectly understood, that sounds like something given to you, as opposed to somebody else. Like God touched you, but not the other person. As opposed to understanding where that grace comes from. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, maybe.
But, well, actually, when it was said with the intent. And intent without understanding is grace itself. Can you see that? The intent is what's important. So when it was said, but for the grace of God goes I, though it was not understood that you're talking about the balance of Elohim, they didn't understand that. They didn't understand what grace was. But the intent was from the source higher than me. If it were not for that, keeping me in check, I would be the same way. That's what it's actually saying. So there are a lot of things. How many times have you said that there are some things I'm just not going to do? And it's based on how you were reared.
Mm-hmm.
It's based on what you were taught. Sheldon. Okay.
Get a sip of water.
What do you need?
Are y'all ready for me?
Yeah.
Well, he's using you as an
the volume
example
all
of
a sudden
what.
is going out. I didn't hear the volume
example.
Somebody said-
anyway, can everyone hear me fine?
Yeah, they said you're getting a sip of water.
Okay. So, the only thing I was thinking about, I'm glad I'm entertaining all of you. But anyway, so in regards to the forgiving both individuals or both parties and the things that actually happen, and to actually feel that anger or whatever it is towards the people who are viewed as the perpetrators of the crime. The reason why you feel that way is because there's something inside of you that you can relate to that particular person. I'm speaking of the perpetrators because you know and understand their actions are a part of what they feel. Well, that same exact thing, even though you may not have gone to the same lengths or not even the same lengths, but the same methodology or whatever of method of acting those thoughts and feelings out, you still relate to them. You still know them. You still have experienced them, which is that crying baby moment. You feeling how you feel towards that baby. So with you not forgiving the perpetrator, is you not forgiving yourself or accepting that aspect of yourself that you do not like. So in a way, it actually is self-hate that you have to come to terms with. That's all I want to say.
And speaking of that, Sheldon, what comes to mind is in interviews with everyone who had connection with those kids, those boys, or men, there was not one person who said that there was any indication that they could possibly do that other than the uncle.
Except, you gotta add the caveat, every one of them that I can remember talked about them at least more than 2 years ago. The parents went back to Russia 2 years ago. So there's something that suggests the younger one was put in the care of the older one. Most of the people who knew him when he was a wrestler, etc., knew them a few years back. So something changed.
But
That's my sense.
But the young one was in school. There were people who were in class with him who said that there's no indication there. My point is this. My point is the Chinese girl who was a victim and the boys who were the perpetrators, their perceptions were different. Now, the perception of the boys, let's just say for example, for a moment, because I don't know why, and I don't purport to know why, okay? But let's just say for a moment that they were angered because of their perception of how America dominates the world or treats people. Well, let me back off of that one and do this one. Suppose for a moment that one of us got that angry because of slavery. And we were, and still are. The question is, how do you approach it? What is your perception of a remedy for it? You see what I'm talking about? Is your perception to terrorize or to hurt or to strike back? Is that how you perceive you are supposed to proceed? Or is it that you are supposed to forgive? And when we look at it from the perspective of slavery, it is no question we are the most forgiving set of people on the face of the earth. Now, this is the other thing about it. When you look at it generationally, I'm the third generation out of slavery. That's not that far long ago. I'm the third generation out of slavery. So, what is it that healed those scars in such a short period of time? It wasn't forgiveness that I rendered. Because I was not forgiven.
Right.
It was the forgiveness that came from my ancestors, the ones who came through the act of slavery. That's where the forgiveness came. And as a result of that, it has an impact on me. It has an impact on you. Can you see that?
Yes.
So whether or not you accept the impact that forgiveness have in a way of enlightenment depends on whether or not you desire to. You don't have to. And if you don't do that, then you may very well end up being the perpetrators of some sort of cataclysmic event that took place last week.
Well, I would almost say you would be, if not something quite that dramatic. It may be some small little distortion in your life because of that. You're keeping that energy alive, so to speak. Right?
Right. So you understand, Sheldon?
Oh, yes. So actually what you just explained is just perpetration of the same energy, which is an inability to forgive. So the actual act of the people who acted out would be an inability to forgive, and the only reason, the source of that not being able to forgive would be that disconnection. And then, so actually, when you jump from one side to well, just polarize yourself on one side, or when anyone polarizes themselves on one side, no matter what side they are on, they're still doing the same exact thing on a spiritual level as the person who perpetrated whatever physical thing they perpetrated.
Well, usually, the recipient of what's going on has a different view than the person who's doing it. For example, racism. When I say that someone is being racist, they say you're playing a race card. That's not racist. How you gonna tell me what race is? And you never experienced it. How you go, you see what I'm talking about? So I cannot say what those kids felt that led them to what happened. Because I have not walked a mile in their shoes. But even though I haven't, I can say that their response to it was not in keeping with enlightenment. Everything that happens in your life or my life, or anyone's life for that matter, is happening in all of our lives and is designed to, or it is there in order to move us in the direction of light. That's it. That's the bottom line. Everything is about light and light. And if we perceive it differently, look at how far we have gone in understanding what's in the book as opposed to where we were when we first started. It's all about desire, and what that does is change your perception of what is. Does that make sense? And when your perception changes, then your actions begin to change as well. So what our desire is, not just for a change in how we perceive things, but our desire also is in not shaping any outcome whatsoever, but allowing what we call it to play out, allowing the energy to shape itself. Because if you can make a difference, you would have already done it. If you have to force it, it doesn't work. How many times have we said that? Don't try to make anything happen. Because every time you try to make it happen, we mess it up. How many times did we say? We were saying that even before we began to understand what's in the scriptures. It is more so now than ever before that when you began to see that you are a creator, then you become more cognizant of your thoughts and your actions, your speech. And there is no way possible for anyone to look at the scriptures and not see that we are creators. Because when we go back to that 1 in 27, when the energy was brought to bear or brought into being, when we look at that in Genesis 1 in 27, we see that it was created, it was brought to be, it was made, it was formed in the image of. So the male-female energy is in the image of Elohim, and Elohim is creating, right? And if the creating is in the image, then that which he creates has the ability to create also. I want to put forth a thought that I want you to challenge, if you want to. I really do. I believe that we have free will, but I also believe that our free will is limited.
Yeah, because my first comment would be that it's not free will.
Limited.
It's limited within the scope of what was created.
I think we have the free will to do it the way that the Creator designed us to do it.
and which means,
Which is within the scope of.
which is the scope of what we created.
Yeah, I mean,
Is that,
you could almost say that according to the law of physics. I mean, you know, whatever the principles of the universe that operate, that's
that's
the
the limitation.
limit of how the universe is able to operate. So, but what's the point?
The point is, I don't want anyone to believe that free will does not come with limitations. Because what you believe is it determines how you act. If you believe that you're God and you think you don't have any boundaries, then you can do anything. You can wreak havoc. It's no different than that kid with 19 years old with a bomb in his hand is no different than a 6-year-old with a gun in his hand. Whether he realized it or not, he became God to himself. He took matters into his own hands to change things. Oh, he and his brother, of course. So if we realize it within boundaries, then we realize that what transpired was supposed to happen, as opposed to us being upset with someone because it happened. I'm not upset about it. Empathy doesn't mean I'm upset.
Well, the only thing makes me go like that is it's supposed to happen, as opposed to, again, within the rules of the universe, the possibility of that happening, if not even the probability of that happening, exists.
Yes.
So it's going to happen somewhere, and in fact, this is what I wanted to make a statement earlier. All we talked about for 5 days, or what we listened to, is this. I don't know how many 100 people were killed in Somalia. I mean, the world is doing these things in other ways at the same time, but we're so focused on this. We don't, you know what I'm saying?
That's the selfishness of us.
The question is whether we see larger than that, or we just figure this all out in some silly way and then we go on.
But we have
The
been,
comment is always, this is America.
we've been taught to have a myopic view of the world.
Well, we know we're special.
We are the world, according to us. It does not matter what happens outside of the boundaries. It does not affect us. We really don't care. USA, USA. I mean, no matter what, you know. Why is it that the event that you brought up earlier about the helicopter going a mile away from its target and killing those people in Iraq in the square? Why is it that no one in America seems to be appalled by that? No, you talk about justice for some people in a marathon, but there's no justice for people around the world. So we understand that, but we cannot afford to become, quote unquote, political as a result of that. Because what I mean by becoming political is beginning to focus on the events that are distractions, as opposed to desiring to bring about a sense of forgiveness throughout the earth, so that what happens in Somalia becomes important. And not just important to those who are in power, but important to those who are powerful. I forget how Barbara termed it about spiritual merit. Yeah, spiritual merit is physical what? Anonymity. Yes, physical.
Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
So the things that we're in the process of bringing into fruition is meritorious spiritually. But the anonymity of it all is with mankind, or the human. And we cannot expect, nor should we desire, the media of physical manifestation to do anything beyond what is being done. We should not expect that. Our expectation is for us to be the agents of change, for us to be the light in the midst of darkness, for us to be the blazers of the pathway that is to be followed, for us to be able to say, not only will you do what I've done, but greater things you shall do. For us to be able to bring the healing to those who are in pain. By virtue of our speaking it, as opposed to our having to wait for someone to do it externally. Does that make sense? Can you get that? It is up to us. We're supposed to do this. We were brought into this earth for this day. Now, I want you to think about this. How many events, tragic events, has taken place in this country since December 21st, 2012, as opposed to December 21st, 2011, or 10, or 9? Huge amount.
One thing after another.
Well, yeah, I was joking.
Far beyond.
I was joking last night with Audrey. It wasn't 2012. It's 2013.
And it's far beyond. You see, what happened?
It was only April.
What happened? What happened that day? What transpired that day? If we were looking at it from a perspective that we desire light, and now we don't see light, all we see are these events, then we see failure. But that's not it.
Light exposes.
Light is exposing the nature, the consciousness of this giant that puts itself forth as the moral image for the world. That's what's happened. And if we have that kind of influence from the 21st of December until the 20th of April, if we have that kind of influence, if we are that powerful in terms of desire, then we ought to also expect that with the exposure of this darkness, of this consciousness, comes light as well. And the light that comes from it is how we deal with what has transpired. Is how we approach it. Can you see that? It's what we are the influencing agent. Now, there may be those who say, you got to be kidding me. Who you think you are? And I say to them, do you know who you are? If 2012, December 24th did anything, it increased the influx of light. And it brought about a greater awareness of who we are. Now, the meat of it all is not knowing, in the classical sense of knowing. The meat of it all is knowing in the biblical sense of knowing. We have to have constant intercourse with the Father or the Spirit or a womb. Constant intercourse, constant with the universe, so that we can be constantly impregnated with light, so that we can constantly manifest light itself and bring it from the ground, the forgiveness, so it can come to a place of fruition. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. That's who we are. That's what we're all about. And if, for any reason, we neglect that, we got a problem.
If for any reason
We neglect it. We got a problem. Yeah. See, when I say we, think about this. Ron said to me this morning, he's studying. He's looking at some stuff for something he's going to teach. And he said to me, I have more questions than I do answers. And I said, terrific. And he kind of laughs. And I said, you have to trust those who are with you. It's no different than being on the football field and trusting the rest of the team. Trust the team that you're with. If not, to raise questions that will give you answers, to give you answers to your questions. Mm-hmm. What am I saying? The trust, the confidence that we have in each other is paramount to our confidence that we are agents of change. We have to trust that beyond anything else. We have to trust that. In everything we face, it's another opportunity for us to express the trust or the confidence that we have. That's what it's all about. So, if there are no more questions or comments, I'm done.
You know, I just as a sort of maybe example of that, that's the sense I get from those families from Connecticut that makes this event for them not just something to endure and in a short term, I guess endure or get past, but it's been very catalytic, and I'm just trying to make the analogy to on a spiritual level. It's brought them together. So now there's a sense that they're not as isolated as many of us kind of live in our lives, and they can be more of a, saying on that sort of level, spirit, force for good, force for what's better, even if, yeah, I mean, I was discouraged like anybody at the Senate vote kind of thing, but there may be something stronger and better that comes out of this, because that was a pretty weak bill anyway.
And something we always say, when something like that happens, Richard mentioned it earlier, and I meant to address it. When the hockey team and basketball team played their next game, the announcer, when they presented the team, said, "We are all Bostonians." When a cataclysmic event happened, we are all Americans, or we are all New Yorkers. You see?
Mm-hmm.
That it seems as though from deep down inside comes a recognition that we are one. But it only happens seemingly when we have bad events to take place, or what we perceive to be bad. If only that perception could prevail continuously, regardless of circumstances, then we would definitely see something different.
And we know we would see something different when we say we are all one, encompassing whatever precipitated that bad event and brought us to the point where we knew we were one.
Right.
That means we are one and they're part of us, and we have to acknowledge that what's in that individual has the capacity to be in us.
And that's why the scripture says we are in the world, but we're not like the world. We're not of this world. We are in the midst of diversity, but we are not the diversity itself. We are in the midst of confusion, but we are not that confusion. We are the ones who are to bring order to that confusion. That's who we are. Okay. Are we done? Okay. Wow.
The light of the truth that we are, and the truth of the light that we are, reminds us that we trust, have confidence in the Word, and it reminds us that our journey has not anything to do with bridging the gap of distance, but has everything to do with bridging the gap, or becoming aware of understanding there is no gap, and becoming aware of who we are, and thereby being able to forgive. Amen.
Amen.